should say recording in progress. I'm not sure. Let me double
Tatum,
check.
it's already recording.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Julia's like yeah, she helps me get oriented. So, hello everyone. Welcome to Fundraising in These Unprecedented Times, Thriving, Not Just Surviving in 2025, hosted by AFP Advancement Northwest. My name is Tatum Mackay. I am the co-chair of the 2025 Programs Committee. Julia was the co-chair last year, and she's here to support. Fantastic to have you here, Julia. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman wearing a purple top and a black jacket, and I have an Irish and English background. If you are joining us from the Seattle area, then you are likely joining us from occupied land. We acknowledge that the city of Seattle is on stolen Coast Salish land, specifically the ancestral land of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Stillaguamish, and Muckleshoot people. We make this acknowledgement to remind ourselves that by being here today, we strive to remedy this injustice through our beliefs and actions. I encourage you to visit native-land.ca to learn more about the land we are occupying. A special welcome to all of our current members who are able to attend this webinar free of charge as a benefit of their membership. You can learn more about the membership and our volunteer opportunities at afpadvancementnorthwest.org. And I'm putting both of these links in the chat there, so you will see both of those. All attendees will receive a recording of today's program and a very short survey, courtesy of Crescinda, our amazing office manager guru. Please take a few minutes to let us know how you like this program and to suggest topics for future programs. This webinar will be recorded and is being recorded right now and added to the program archive on our website. And now for the introduction. So today's main event is Fundraising in These Unprecedented Times, Thriving, Not Just Surviving in 2025. Navigating the funding landscape in 2025 feels like walking a tightrope over an active volcano. Federal freezes, anti-DEIA pressures, and ever-shifting policies threaten the very core of nonprofit missions. The confluence of economic uncertainty, political polarization, and shifting governmental priorities creates a fundraising landscape unlike anything we have seen before. Join Anna Cronin, a seasoned development director with Solid Ground, Alyssa Haslam, a leading advocate for state voices, and Michelle Johnson, an experienced professional from Ultimate Rainbow Consulting, as they share their experiences from the first 52 days of this new administration. They'll offer concrete strategies for diversifying your funding streams, crafting compelling messaging to donors in a climate of uncertainty, and preparing your organization to become stronger advocates for your cause. Attendees will have the opportunity to ask questions and share their own experiences throughout this presentation. You will walk away with practical tools and insights to manage your program in these challenging times. And before we give them a big welcome, I want to set the context here. We don't know everything. We're going to share with you what we've learned from the past, for example, 2008, 2020, and the last 2 months, and our experiences with our orgs and peer organizations. We invite you to also add to this conversation in the chat and share your experiences. We are recording this, as mentioned, to share it out further. Please don't say anything that you don't want recorded. We're here to support our communities. And I and Julia will help moderate the conversation and point out when there are questions in the chat. So message in the chat. Let's start by connecting. If you feel so inclined, please put your LinkedIn in the chat and let's connect. And so with that, please join me in giving a big welcome to Anna Cronin, Alyssa Haslam, and Michelle Johnson. And we can do the clap here or let them all come on here now. So we're all ready to go.
I'll go first. Hi, all. My name is Anna Cronin, she, her pronouns. I'm the Senior Director of Philanthropy and Communications at Solid Ground. I've been accidentally in fundraising for coming up on 2 decades, and I've worked across many sectors, but mostly human services and healthcare and a little bit in the arts, and have a wonderful team at Solid Ground that works real hard and does some real important work, and I'm proud to be there.
Great, thanks, Anna. I'll jump in. Hi, everybody. My name is Alyssa Haslam. I use she, her pronouns. I work for a national organization called State Voices, but I am located here in Seattle. And State Voices is a national organization that is a national group that provides a lot of different capacity support to 24 state table organizations who together are fighting for a multiracial democracy where folks, especially BIPOC and marginalized communities, can thrive and live in their dignity. That looks a lot like voter registration, voting, policy change. So I'm coming into this conversation a little bit with a national lens and an advocacy lens, but I was an executive director for a short time here in Washington State and have some fundraising. I'm also an accidental fundraiser because of that, mostly raising money from individual donors and some local foundations.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Michelle Johnson. I use she, her pronouns. I am additionally an accidental fundraiser, just like my pals here. I've been fundraising for 25 plus years. I started out in the arts. I graduated with a degree in playwriting and showed up at the theaters and was like, I'm ready to write plays. And they're like, we need money. And I got my start in healthcare at a free clinic. Went into the Peace Corps, and upon my return ended up going down an advocacy path as well. So I've spent most of my career working for rights organizations like women's rights, queer rights, immigration rights, and healthcare policy and advocacy. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so happy to be here with all of y'all. It is a wild time, and we can't wait to share with you what we're learning, what we're doing, and hopefully we can share also together. As I posted on social media this morning, we are who we need. We are our community. So I will go ahead and get started. I have this really nice long quote from Diane Yantel of the National Council of Nonprofits. And I'm going to let you all read it. So when we put this idea together, the most terrible, I mean, there were many terrible things that had happened, but the executive orders were at the front end of all the things that had been going on. Now more has happened in that time period. So just kind of setting the tone right now, you all know the tone every single day, but just as kind of a high level thing of everything that's going on, the executive orders, as we know, have frozen funding, which have led to hiring freezes and an enormous amount of loss in research, especially. There are anti-DEIA initiatives all across the organization, all across the United States right now, and specific issues are being targeted and specific communities are also being targeted. That has caused some funders to pull back, and also consumer confidence and consumer sentiment is down, which we know oftentimes correlates directly to a drop in individual support. On the flip end, some funders are actually stepping up, and we've seen this recently. Some have started a movement to add in 6% versus 5% of the legal requirement. And other institutional funders are leaning in much harder at 10% and more. There is also a lot of freedom of speech issues. Universities and individuals are being taken, universities are being sued, and funding is being threatened because folks are exercising their First Amendment rights. Whew. Here's just a snapshot of some of the headlines we've been seeing recently. And to counter that a little bit, I want to let you all know there are a bunch of folks that we should be following just to keep up to date on all of this. I do want to point out that this is one of the most galvanized I've ever seen the nonprofit sector. We have lost the I don't want to say battle, but we have not always been on top of supporting our sector. We have let things happen and not come together. So I really appreciate the galvanizing for our country, for our sector, for our democracy that has been happening. That's been very encouraging. And I just wanted to recommend these folks right here. Okay, so, and I'm going to invite both Anna and Alyssa to jump in here. So 52 days in, where we're at, and these are just some highlights of some of the things that we've been thinking as a group. Scarcity won't work, and it has never worked, but it especially won't work now. Transparency is essential, even when you don't know the answers. Being consistent with your messaging is super important, and also staying on top of your messaging. I think Anna posted this one. Because things are happening so quickly, what is your plan? What is that trigger that is going to cause you to respond and remember in service to your mission, right? We're talking about our work people right now. We do have a slide where we talk about ourselves as individuals, right? But we're talking about yourself as a fundraiser. And that is why you also need to separate your priorities from your personal priorities, your work priorities. We are whole human beings. We show up as a whole human being at our work, and we also have our personal space as well. Your work priorities do not have to be the same as your personal priorities. They can overlap, but you do not have to carry on the weight of the world. And I have more thoughts about that later. So, but we're talking about work in this specific instance. All right, Anna, we're going to hop off with you. Get us started.
All right. So Solid Ground, I'm here to talk a little bit about what it's like to be an organization that has federal funding. Solid Ground actually did anticipate, as I'm sure many organizations did, that some things might change when the new administration came into place. And so we actually did our public funding analysis before the Trump administration was inaugurated, because we have some contracts that are directly with the federal government, but they're very few and very small. Most of our public funding comes from county, state, and city sources, and those sources have public funding streams that come to them. So one of the things we learned was how important it was to do that analysis. We do now know which programs would be the most affected if the federal funding was fully freezed. But also we have funding across many of our programs. And so it was really important to know like which federal agency was our biggest funder, which we provide some homeless services. So HUD is our largest funder. So we have plans now for what do we do if this particular contract is affected? What do we do if this group of contracts are affected? What does it look like at our agency if we get on some kind of a list? And we committed right away. Our mission is our mission, and it will not change. And Solid Ground has a pretty bold mission. Our mission is to end poverty and to undo racism and other forms of oppression that are the root causes of poverty. That mission statement is potentially puts us at risk for violating some of the executive orders that came out, right? So we really thought about what does it mean to commit to and stand behind our bold mission, and then also look at what might happen as if we make that stance, as we make that stance. The next thing we did is we protected our admin budget. Solid Ground in the 90s, our executive director, Cheryl Cobbs Murphy, was really early in making it clear that you'd call it DEI, we call it anti-racist initiatives are essential to an organization and need to have their own body of work to make sure that the organization is leaning into that practice. And so we have a very important anti-racist initiative and an anti-racist initiative manager who does work that we deem essential, but it was in our admin budget, right? So we pulled it out of our admin budget and we put it into its own program budget so that it's protected and we can't be called upon for having federal funds pay for that. And the next thing we learned is that we cannot do everything, but we must do something. We were 6 days in, I think, and I don't know, has it been like 100 years now? But we were 6 days in, and there were emails flying back and forth. This was when the federal freeze came out, and our very wonderful CEO sent out an email just reminding us that if we are at this pace 6 days in, we are never going to make it for years. So we have plans, we have strategy. Let's make sure that we are being really careful about what we are working on and how we are working on those things. We recognized that solid ground has a sphere of influence. There are things that people look to us to provide information about. There are people that we serve, and we care about the issues that affect the people that we serve, but we do have a sphere of influence. For example, immigration work affects us because our staff needs to know what to do if an ICE immigration officer shows up at someone's door. And that's not the core of our work. So people aren't going to look to us. None of our supporters are going to ask solid ground, what do we do about immigration? So we work up to what we need to and then make sure that our staff has that information. But the things that we focus on are the things that are in our sphere of influence. And then finally, having just radical transparency for staff and leadership as much as possible. Things are happening intentionally fast and intentionally at a breakneck speed. And our staff need to know that we are paying attention, that we have a plan for what's happening, that we understand what's happening. They look to us to help them understand what's happening. So one of the first things we did is we already had a dedicated site called Incident Command, which was stood up during the pandemic for COVID-related information. And we just modified that to now include changes at the federal administration so that staff know exactly where to go to find information. We put our updated policies, trainings. Sometimes it's just, you may have read about this in the news. This is what it means for solid ground, and this is what we're doing about it. But we make sure that staff know where to go and that they understand what is happening. Next slide, please. So that's at a leadership level, at the solid ground leadership level. This is more about as fundraisers. So I lead the fundraising team at Solid Ground. And the very, very, very first thing we did, and I'm sure many of you did this too, was to identify the donors and supporters who might be moved first to help stand in the gap. And we started talking to them right away to tell them, again, what we were doing, what we were seeing, what might affect us, and how they could help. I'm sure you're all seeing this too, but in the last several weeks, the first question every single donor has asked as we're out on a donor meeting is, how does the federal stuff, how is that affecting you and what are you doing about it, right? So people care a lot. They want to make a difference. It's a little bit like COVID, not quite the same, where people are feeling helpless, they're feeling angry. And so providing our donors with that place to sort of plug in has been really important. And then we also built some messaging into our grant communications. And this will vary. All grant applications are a little bit different, but most have that place where you have a little bit of an introduction. And private funders in general seem to have an attitude that public funding is immutable, and clearly it is not. And so we have a very talented team of grant writers, and we crafted some language. This is one of those cases where it's a little bit diplomatic, it's a little bit less clear, or a direct call to action, but it makes the statement that, yes, we have public funding, but also we need your support, and the public funding landscape is changing. The other thing we did is support leadership and boards with calls to action. These are the folks who have boots on the ground and networks that are broader than any we have inside. And they're looking to us to help distill this information and figure out exactly what they should be saying. So we created some very specific talking points and calls to action for our board specifically. And then we've had to make some tough choices, and I'm sure the choices will get probably harder. We had our first brush up with one of our federal contracts that is almost entirely federal funding, federally funded. Um, Reached out to us and let us know that a couple of words in our grant application had been flagged for not complying with the executive order. And we had a choice to remove those words from our grant application if we wanted to keep that funding. And so that was sort of our first hard choice. We made the decision as a leadership team that they didn't ask us to change our service delivery. They didn't ask us to scrub our website. They didn't ask us to change our mission. So how we do our work is not going to change. And because this particular contract relied on federal funding, without it, staff jobs would go away. So that felt like, I don't want to say easy, but more simple decision. And once we made that decision, we also knew that we needed to let staff know so that there wasn't, so that we were clear about what actually happened and what was being asked of us. I'm sure the choices will get harder. I hope not. I hope that was the worst one. Um, but we do now have a sort of method for how we make these choices. Next slide, please. So 3 things you and your team can do right now. And that first is just encourage you to be as transparent as possible with your staff. There's this feeling that we all have is this is intentional by the administration. They want us to feel unmoored. They want us to feel overwhelmed. They want us to feel scared. And I think it's so critically important that leaders make sure that staff have somewhere to point to, someone helping them understand what's going on. And even just like I said earlier, helping people understand, what if something comes out and if there are 2 articles about HUD closing down, what does that actually mean? How does that affect us right now? What do we know right now? And being that sort of place for your staff, I think is really important. And the second is to be really intentional about building out a messaging framework. So we had our communications team, our advocacy team, and our ARI, Anti-Racist Initiative Manager, meet and talk about what might it look like to share information about how this is affecting us over the next year or 2? Are we going to talk about it every time we write an email? Are we going to put it in all of our newsletters? One thing we decided we're definitely going to do is have a quarterly message from our CEO directly to our supporters, from her voice. But also, as we talk about these changes, how are we talking about it? Are we talking about it as though the sky is falling and we need everyone to come step up and help us? Or is it more about here's an opportunity for supporters to link arms with us and stand up for what we all believe in and we all know is right? And I think it depends a little bit on how it's affecting you and how urgent it is. And then we also thought there's probably a different framework for that continued messaging that we're sending out over the course of the next couple of years. And then when do we decide something is urgent? How does that decision get made? What might that messaging look like? And how do we distinguish between the two? And then lastly, identify and target your close supporters and funders and bring them in immediately. I heard a really, really great idea in a call I was in this week. They held a funder call, and it was an open Zoom meeting, and they invited private funders and close donors. The CEO was there, the development director, a senior program person. They had a little bit of messaging they wanted to share, but then they also just offered an opportunity for being in community together and asking questions and responding to what we know at this moment in time. So, and we're going to do that too.
Great. Thanks, Anna, for setting the stage on that. And thanks, Michelle, for finding this slide. This is a great sort of introduction to my section. Hello again, everybody. My name is Alyssa. I'll set a little bit of context first, and then I'm really here to talk more. Can you go back one before we go into the strengthening advocacy and building resilience? I also want to follow up with just a little bit more additional context, I think, building on what you said, Anna, about the organization that I work for. We do not get federal funding. So State Voices is primarily funded through private foundations, some individual donors, but we are definitely in the community of national groups that are likely to face retaliation because we are unapologetically an organization rooted in anti-racism to build the power of Black and Brown and other marginalized communities through voter education, policy change, and empowering and providing a lot of capacity to our state table partners to do that work. And so we have already been targeted by what we thought a long time ago were not very strong conservative research institutes, but those institutes now are actually directly feeding lists to the new administration of folks that could potentially be considered terrorist organizations. So one of the things that we were doing in our scenario planning in the fall. Now, in the fall, we were doing scenario planning with all of our state tables. Our staff were, I think about 45 of our staff were an organization of about 50. We're in states doing voter education, voter outreach, door knocking, all 501c3. None of this was C4. This was all nonpartisan, allowable advocacy to get to turn out the vote. And we were all in DC on election night and kind of expected that we would at least not know an answer for a couple of weeks. And I think all of us were really shocked to wake up. I mean, I was on the East Coast at the time. You all were probably hearing it way earlier in your evening, but I think we were all a little bit shocked at how fast the results came in. And then we were like, okay, what does this really mean and what does it look like? So we really just started doubling down on how do we start preparing and how are they going to start attacking organizations, their operations, what kinds of things are they going to do to take down organizations? How do we make sure that our network is prepared? Because the reality is we are only as strong as our state table network. And when I say state tables, I mean coalitions of groups working together with grassroots organizations that are doing all sorts of different policy change, ballot initiatives, voter education, legislative lobbying. And we are sort of the net that keeps folks together and aligned across the country. So this is how we came into 2025 was, fully ready, figuring out what we need to do to boost our security. What do we need to do to understand, make sure that we are organizationally safe and sound. And then it was interesting because we participate in a lot of national coalitions, and it was interesting to see kind of where things were shifting as the new administration came in. So now we can go to the next slide. So the thing that is particularly interesting for folks, again, we don't do direct advocacy or direct service, is that as we were participating in national coalitions, folks were like, oh, we need to start thinking about state organizing. Like, what do we do in the states? And I don't know how many of you have national affiliates or have worked with national affiliates. I've worked with Planned Parenthoods and I've worked with ACLUs and lots of different national organizations. And we function a little differently where we are in an affiliation by relationship. Our state tables opt in to be a part of our network together. We are not top down, and we are very much in service to the work that's happening in the states and on the ground. So what we were finding is we were actually uniquely positioned to advocate for an increase in funding and attention on state organizing because the groups that we work with on the ground have been doing this work for 15 years. And their work hasn't changed. I mean, a lot of state tables are facing hostile state legislators and legislatures. And at this point, they're mostly like, I can't pay attention to federal because I'm already fighting all these things happening in my own state. And so they're looking to us as a national group to help filter what they should or should not be paying attention to that is most core to our mission. It is also because there's going to be an increased focus on state organizing and state policy change, and people are going to be looking to states and cities to figure out like, how do we keep our mission moving? It's really important for groups, whether you have an advocacy plan or you don't, to sort of figure out what the advocacy landscape is that impacts your work. Because there are some groups who do really great direct service, but they have an advocacy arm to fight for the budget at the city council, the school board, or the state legislature, while they're also feeding housing and doing all the things. There's other groups who literally just do that advocacy on behalf of housing and others, but partner with direct service providers. So it's really important for folks here to think about what is my advocacy lens? And who are the people that I should be aligned with, whether you want to do advocacy or not, and you want to contact legislators or local elected leaders or not. Know who does and figure out where you can fit in so that, as Michelle was saying earlier, we're linking arms and we're in community together, doing more together than feeling like we have to retreat into our corners and like fight for scraps, because that is not going to be helpful at this point in the game, considering, as Anna said, like 6 days in early on when it was that like frantic, we're just never going to survive if we don't kind of take a deep breath, center ourselves on what's the most important thing we can do for our mission and for our people and our community, and who are the other folks that are aligned with us on that, and how can we step into advocacy if we want to, or how can we play a different role and in the back end of, and support the advocacy groups that are out on the front lines doing that. So just to, as a lot of folks here are nested in states, from the national level, just highlighting that like state work is going to become more and more important, and there will be more attention on the work that's happening on the ground in states. So for your organization, some of the things to know is that you want to know who your decision makers are that will influence the policies and budgets related to your work. Some of that may be super local, some of it may be statewide policymakers. How are you galvanizing your community? Whether you have email lists, if you have direct lines. I know we have, I think, a public station here. We have a PBS station here. Like, how are you galvanizing the community that you serve and who goes to your website and reads your emails? And like I said, develop an advocacy plan or find the partners who know how or who are doing it. And you have a good landscape analysis of what will impact your mission. That similarly goes with building the mission aligned partnerships. And really, at the end of the day, focusing on 2 to 3 things that are most crucial to your mission. We have a really talented policy department, and our policy team is like hair on fire, figuring out how do we take all of these outputs coming from the federal government right now and make sense of them and share what we need to our states. And our states have gone through and we've surveyed them and asked them what they want to know. And they finally whittled it down to like, here's the 4 issues that are core to what we do. That's going to be most important for the state tables and our state partners to know. Other things they can figure out on, like they'll be doing their own research on issue specific things. But when it comes to voting, when it comes to like limiting free speech in elections, when it comes to the nonprofit, strengthening nonprofits and our ability to actually continue to function as a 501c3, those are the kinds of things that we're paying most attention to in support of our network. Next slide. The other thing that we did really from the get-go is there was a big thing. I mean, as everybody was focusing on the nonprofit, the threat to nonprofit status bill, we have been providing multiple trainings for our state network on how to protect your nonprofit and things to do now in case you come under investigation. I don't really have a sense of how many state-based groups they're going to be coming after, especially when it comes to direct service organizations. I think it's probably more like what Anna was saying in terms of like if you got federal funding and you have DEI in your website, like that's a real thing and they could rescind funding. We were focused more on, are they going to come after our IRS status? So we were hosting a lot of webinars that talk about what does an investigation look like and what are some of the areas that all nonprofits should be tending to. And luckily, we have a very talented operations director, chief of operations, who all of our organizational operations are sound. And when we got a checklist, which somebody will share in chat, we have a link to it, was just like, if you do nothing else, here's the top 10 or 15 things to do to make sure your internal organizational house is in order. Because the way they come after you is like, you missed something in a grant deadline, or you forgot to sign this paperwork. Like it's the most mundane way that they're going to try to trap nonprofits, but it's time consuming. And so like the best defense is to just go on offense and say, you know what, I've got all my board minutes for the last so many years. I've got my 990s, I know where they are. I've got my conflict of interest policies signed and updated. I have a document retention policy and it is sound and we've gone through and we're adhering to it. So there's a checklist for every nonprofit that we've been working with to go through just to like make sure that you have like that internal house in order, because that is definitely helping to allay the fear that if they do come after us, they're not going to catch us on a technicality around like your org paperwork and your licensing. But that's something that especially smaller nonprofits who don't have a lot of resources or HR people. This is the first nonprofit I've worked for that has an HR department and an ops department. So like, so this was a resource that we put together that is shareable to other nonprofits, just so folks have something that they can at least start looking at to help look at their resiliency and do they have what they need if something comes up. The other thing we've been paying a lot of attention to is digital safety and security, using VPNs and two-factor authentication and all sorts of boring stuff on the back end to just make sure that your work phones, your computers are all safe and sound. So that's some of the stuff that we've been really investing time in. And then we've also been starting a conversation about risk. And I think risk is an interesting concept because I think a lot of people think of risk as like, I'm going to get in trouble if I do something bad. One of the things that we've been starting to talk about is what is the risk of not fulfilling my mission? And what is the risk of not stepping in this moment? And what do we risk by not linking arms with other people? And what do we risk by retreating? And I've really appreciated that framework because it is allowing us to say, okay, where do we want to be bold? How do we be bold and stay safe? We have a sister C4 that we're also building because we decided that we need two entities to help really protect us. There's protections that come under different organizational entities. And so I definitely recommend for folks to really, if you haven't already, to talk to leadership, talk to the folks that need to really sit down and go, okay, let's really talk about what risk is. How do we think about risk? How should we be thinking about risk? And coming up with some of those screens. I think, Anna, you were talking about that, is like, what's the screen with which we're going to share with our members this news story? What are some of the things that we do or don't want to do, or how do we want to talk about things? So that's just a very small bite-sized chunk of things that we've been prioritizing just in these first 3 months. But I also want to give a shout out to this notion of radical transparency. I work for an amazing woman of color who leads our organization, and she has dedicated all this time on culture building. And she, in staff meetings, has said over and over again, I don't have all the answers, but like we're here and we're trying to figure it out. And these are the ways we're figuring it out. And we want to be open and we want to tell staff what we need to tell them when we need to tell them and make sure they are aware of the reality we're in, but we're not giving them so much that like they're going to get freaked out and think that we're in danger. And so I just have really appreciated the way that she's approached leadership in uncertain times. And that is something that is really important. And I can share a blog post that she has online about culture and some of the things that she's been doing to increase that at the organization. So thanks.
Great.
Oh, go ahead.
One piece, I'm sorry, I keep running around with my mouse. One piece I wanted to talk about just real quickly, and anybody in the group can chime in. We were asked also to address, while we're still talking about advocacy, to talk about what does it look like to be an advocate in your personal life? So just quickly, because some of us work for institutions where we cannot be an advocate in the institution, we get too much federal funding or there's strings attached to our federal funding. Prioritize your time. And we mentioned this earlier, your work priorities do not have to be your personal priorities. And if your work priority is this and you share the same priority, you know what? Leave that priority in your workspace and that frees you up to do something different in your personal space, right? You can always clarify that you are not speaking on behalf of your employer or your group, and you don't wear workplace gear or logo when advocating. If you are doing protesting or anything like that, don't wear your, Cascade Media jacket, right? Wear your Columbia jacket, right? Advocate for others, join, support, and advocate with groups who are already doing this work. Like Alyssa says, your organization can find these people. You as an individual can also find these people. And I think another big important piece is show up when you say you're going to. You do not have to commit to everything. Please don't. Like, this is a marathon, right? But when you say you're going to show up, do show up. And lastly, hold your leaders accountable, make those calls. There's tons of tools and apps to do that, but do that work. And get educated. Follow the leaders and speakers who support your causes. Do you want to add anything else, Alyssa or Anna, to this?
Just that I like exclamation points. You can tell it's me when it has exclamation points after everything.
And in the corner is a picture of me advocating for the
Love
marriage
it.
equality campaign back in the day. I'm going to go quickly so we have more time for questions. And this is a lot of what Alyssa and Anna have already said, but this is communicating with your donors, with your supporters, with your community at a whole, at a large, right? So again, radical transparency. We have to be transparent, even if we don't know the answers. Um, Explain the reasons why we're in this situation. I think Anna was talking about everybody thinks that federal funding is like, honey and it's never going away and then we're stuck with it. And obviously that is changing. So provide a clear explanation of why your organization is in this situation, whether it's financial, whether it's an advocacy-based piece or you're being retaliated against, and remind people of the mission, right? They're stepping in to join you on this work because of the mission. Communicate often and timely. This is a fundraisers kind of 101, right? The Russo circle of our community and of our people, right? We also might have volunteers and staff in the middle, but we have our board and staff at the dead center. And as we go out, the message is going to change and the frequency might change. I do love the webinar. I'm actually helping an org set up a funders webinar where they're going to bring in their closest supporters, or not webinar, Zoom call, to talk about what's going on. What does it mean for the org? They're not in a sky is falling scenario because they don't get federal funding, but they are in a sky is falling scenario because they're a trans rights organization, right? And so what is this going to mean for their organization? Be specific on what you need. I can't even tell you how much people are asking for, what do we do now? What's next? How can I help you? What do you need? Have that answer ready to go. If it's money, if it's connecting with other supporters, if it's bringing coalitions together, you're with a food bank, I'm with a food bank, let's unite as food banks, right? Like, be specific. And kind of in your consistent communication, tell them what's going on, tell them what you've asked for, provide updates. This is like fundraising 101, but we need to look back at the last message we sent, and are we updating that message, right? Are we continuing that story? Express gratitude, of course, plan for the future, and use all your channels. Make sure the messaging is consistent. And of course, the things that you're telling the public may not be the same that you're telling your staff and your board, right? Because we have different levels of nuance and complexity and things like that. Next thing, I wanted to show you some orgs that are doing some things well. Washington Women's Foundation is doubling down on their mission. And, the Ballard Food Bank, which I can see from my window, is like, we are going to protect you. We are not sharing information. So that is really important and powerful for the community at large as well. Wanted to end with that. Your silence will not protect you. And now we're going to go into questions.
Yes, and thank you so much. What an incredible webinar. I'm just grateful for you all in your presentation. So in the chat or come on audio, any questions you might have. We're going to spend the next 6 minutes or 7 minutes on questions.
Or even suggestions, anything you've seen that that you liked or worked real well.
I do just want to acknowledge that it is a really scary time for a lot of us. And I know every day getting on the phone or getting, reading your news can be terrifying. And we really do need to lean in and the whole not complying, right? Like we can't comply to authoritarianism. And we also can't comply until we're asked to, until they come back and ask us to remove these things from our grant or whatever, right? Like nobody's asked, if they haven't asked you to do those things yet, we can be prepared, but we really need to lead in with courage. And I know it can be difficult and scary. And I just want to say that we're in this together.
Hey, Michelle, this is Ben Derby. I just want to reiterate, organizations that can come together and do things together like organizations. Just a couple, I think about a week or two ago, we had a Protect Our Public Media Day where, all, NPR stations, public radio stations, public television stations all came together and we developed a website about how to contact your Congress people. And it was just a big day for advocacy, and that was our combined message, and it was really impactful.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
I think we had a hand up. Erin had her hand up. Erin, did you still have a question?
Oh, I was just wondering, I don't know that it's necessarily well, I'd love your feedback if you have any insight or just thoughts on, we're existing kind of in this tension of like legitimate funding threats and what's sort of an overstimulating um scare campaign by the current administration, where a lot of it is um happening to keep us very confused. And so when working with your nonprofits, with your donors, with just operating in your day-to-day life, in your job, staying focused on what you're doing and what you can control. I wonder if you have any like lived experience or examples of um, good advice you've received for how we exist and maybe even thrive in this tension of what to believe and what to sort of wait out.
Ugh, that is such a great question, and I would love other folks to chime in. I I have lots of do what I say, not what I do. 100%. But I did hear I'm a big fan of TikTok, and I was following a TikToker creator, and he was like, look, consuming the news is like eating a pizza. You can't eat the whole pizza. It'll make you sick. You'll lay on the ground, hold your stomach. You might throw up, like literally might throw up. He's like, you've got to consume it, like have a piece at lunch for like 5 minutes and then have another piece at dinner time. But trust me, the pizza will still be there. And that is the truth, right? And actually, what we've noticed is that the pizza changes. Like if you consume all the news first thing in the morning, by the end of the day, everything's already changed, right? And so I just wanted to put that out there. We've got to look at our media consumption and the things we're choosing to worry about or to be concerned about or act on with the limited and finite amount of energy we have. But I would love more advice on how people are doing this, because I admittedly am not doing great all the time.
Laura said something really interesting in the chat. I heard a funder say yesterday, what will we ignore? What will we slow walk? What will we do or fight? Really great. And then Jaren, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I loved what Anna shared about being prepared with a plan, but not being constantly reactionary. Alfred Group did a webinar recently on ABC scenario planning that folks might find helpful, and it's in the chat.
I think I heard another great metaphor. I won't say the whole thing because the pizza one is good too, but um it was more like the information is a river and you want to go down to the riverbank and get a little bit, touch it, right? But don't wade into the middle because then you'll drown. And so I think all of that is really good advice. I also think like media literacy is so important. I saw a TikTok, on Instagram, because I don't actually have TikTok, but talking about protect your attention, right? So really, really curate the information that you trust and that you believe in. And I mean, I know this is really trite, but also do your research. When when the news was going around about all the HUD closures, we did have someone reach out to us and say, like, should we communicate about this? And it's not yet at a place where it affects us. The stuff they're talking about is not related to housing and our lane. But you have to really dig into it to know that. You have to really go to the trusted sources, not even just the news sites, because King 5 News had an article that made it sound like we were going to lose our funding tomorrow. But really, like, the source document, what are they talking about and how might that actually impact our organization? And that's exhausting too. So that's why I think it's so important to pick your lane on. You can't do that for everything. You cannot research every single executive order that's coming out. So the ones that affect you personally and professionally, I think you have to figure out, how do I discern what is actionably harmful at this moment? There are also potential downstream harmful effects. What are those as well? But really sticking to the things that are in your sphere of influence and not going down too many rabbit holes.
Yeah, and I was just going to add to that. That's where it's also helpful to link up with an organization that does track that kind of stuff. And that's where it's helpful to be in partnership with folks who either do some sort of lobbying or advocacy, because often they will have research capacity or people who are doing that. And there tends to be, I think, associations or some sort of like advocacy center for most issues, right? Whether it's immigration, housing, LGBTQ, trans rights, like there usually is one or two organizations that are tracking a lot of things. So getting to know who those folks are for your issue will be helpful, because it'll help you weed through the noise so you don't have to, and you can stay focused on the other work that you're doing to fulfill your mission.
So we have time for one more question. It's in the chat. Thank you so much for that, Alyssa. Hong asked, do you have any advice for those of us who are part of a national organization that is obeying in advance?
Can you clarify a little bit more what you mean by obeying in advance, Hong?
Yes. So they control our website, and they've gone through and said, for all the chapters in the organization, we're going to take down our values because of XYZ, and we need to scrub it for these things. And that goes for other marketing and promotional materials, et cetera, et cetera. What should we do? What can we do?
Like, because your local folks are not wanting to do that, right? So it's the national that's doing it. I think, depending on how many other locals you have, I mean, this is where my inner organizer comes in, which is like, who else is sort of being impacted by national, like, decisions at the national? Like, this is another level of decision maker, right? They're not an elected official. They're not necessarily like the community advocacy, but this is where you can start gathering some of your people and other folks at different affiliates. This has happened in other places, to actually try to hold your national accountable to the harm that they might be doing to the local community, and try to like help like make the case that they should be thinking a little bit more expansively about like what do they have to do versus what are they doing just out of fear. So this may be just like another arm of advocacy is with your own people, right? And organizing people within the affiliates that are not happy with what's happening nationally.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you, Anna and Michelle. This has really been so helpful and so much great information here. So we will be sending out a short survey with the recording, and it will also be posted in our newsletter. So thank you so much on behalf of AFP Advancement Northwest for coming to this webinar. And as a reminder, you can check out our benefits of becoming a member. Those who are members came to this for free, and I personally have joined, and I absolutely love it. I've learned so much, and I've found a community of like-minded people. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. And that concludes our webinar. It's so great to see everybody here. So presenters, you're getting lots of great kudos in the chat. And thanks so much, everyone. I'll stay on for a little bit, and I'm going to stop recording now.